sunshine, really at risk to get actually let us see the books. And they say to us, they say, well, we already have an audit. Anybody remember the exchange between Congressman Grayson and the Inspector General, the one who does the audit? He asked her, do you know where, I don't think I'm getting much out of the microphone. Anybody got any help on that? Oh, we broadcast, that's better, much better. Hey, so they asked Grayson asked the inspector that's supposed to be the auditor, do you know where $1 trillion went that we bought of these assets? And she said, well, frankly, no. And he said, well, do you know about the $2 trillion that was bought in assets? Oh, well, that's not our job. That's not our job description. We are not supposed to do that. So we have an audit that tells you, what they spent on coffee, okay? What they spent on donuts, but they won't tell you what they spent on the $4.5 trillion they spent on, they call them assets, but these are liabilities. These are debts. Of the $4.5 trillion that the Fed owns, $2 trillion of it is said to be troubled. It's said to be assets that who knows what it's worth. You remember when when this crisis is going on, they're talking about mark to market? It's probably not the greatest idea. You have to mark something down even though you're not selling it, and it can cause a collapse of your credit by having things marked down. If you were to take those same accounting principles, though, and apply them to the Fed, then we'd know whether their stuff's worth anything. Does it make a difference to the economy? Yes. If $2 trillion is distressed and it's not of value, what if it's worth 10 cents on the dollar? They're off by 90%. They're way insolvent. We've got a terrible problem here. I tell people, once upon a time, your dollar was as good as gold. Then for many decades, they said your dollar was backed by the full faith and credit of government. But you know what it's backed by now? Used car loans, bad home loans, distressed assets, and derivatives. That's $2 trillion out of the $4 trillion are things that we're not sure what they're worth. They're not encountering the marketplace. The reason the Fed bought them was probably because nobody wanted them. Now people say, well, just get rid of the Fed, which would be great. But the reason we have a Fed is because we have debt. So it's either chicken and the egg. They are related. Peter Bernholtz wrote about this. He said that many times that countries that end up in hyperinflation end up there because it's this burden of debt. How do you pay off the debt? With cheap money. When you have a great deal of debt, what do you have to do? You have to keep the interest rates low. So all throughout the early part of the century, we kept interest rates low, 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 low. So if you're a home builder, you're like, or if you're buying a house, you're like, well, this is great. 2% to buy a house, 2%, nothing down, 3%, 3.5%. So everybody bought a house. Then the government said, well, you don't really need to put anything down either. No big deal. Just go get your loan. Whoever you are, want everybody to have a house. In a real marketplace, what happens is when more and more people are bidding for the money, the price of the money is interest. Interest is a price. It's the price of the money. When more people want it, the price goes up. When the price goes up, it slows the economy down. So you have a cyclical nature to the economy, but that was lost. And so we have a housing boom that's doing this, and just doing this, and then doing this towards the end. I had one guy in my neighborhood bought and sold houses 4 times and made 20% each time he sold. It just moved from one house to the next. You know something's wrong when that's going on. It is an illusion. But here's the question now. The president is big on that there's income inequality. Well, yeah, I think there is. Seems to be worse in cities run by Democrat mayors, states run by Democrat governors, and countries run by Democrat presidents. But part of income inequality has to do with the Fed also. Because if the Fed is keeping interest rates low, where do ordinary people put their money to save it? In a bank. Is anybody going to put it in to get 0? Or some banks offer minus. Yeah, I never even heard of this. There's now negative interest rates at banks. You pay them to keep your money. But the thing is that's what ordinary people do. If you're pretty wealthy and you have assets, you've bought stocks and you've been able to ride the curve of this. But it's a disproportion of people who are very connected that are riding the curve. But here's the question I have. They say that in one audit of the Fed, they're afraid of all these things. They're afraid of Congress getting involved. I want to know who the people are that own the $4 trillion worth of debt. Are they friends? Are they relatives of the people who work there? Did they go to school together? Were they in the same business? Is there a revolving door between Wall Street, the Treasury, and back to the Fed, and back to Wall Street again? Are those not questions that every taxpayer in America should be allowed to know what's going on at the Fed? They say that if you know the distressed banks, maybe you won't trade with those people anymore and they will go bankrupt. Well, maybe if you do a bad job, that's what should happen to you. Bernie Sanders and I don't agree with a lot, but Bernie Sanders said that the bailouts were essentially socialism for the rich and rugged, and for the poor it was, do as you can, do the best you can, you're on your own individualism. And it's kind of a way, it's a reverse here, that we have government actually helping the very wealthy people, and then you end up having the regular middle class supporting this, and then they're like, oh, but we're not going to let you look at the books. We'll let you know where we buy donuts. We'll let you know where we, buy the coffee, but we're not going to let you know who we bought the $4 trillion worth of assets from. We're not going to let you know who the $2 trillion that we bought from that are troubled assets and that may not be worth anything. So I think there needs to be some sunshine. I'm going to fight them, and we're going to get a vote on Audit the Fed. Yeah! A couple other quick items. So you may remember I sued the president. I sued the president over the NSA, the bulk collection of all your phone records. I say, it's none of their damn business what you do on your phone. But I have been willing to work with the president on some criminal justice reform. I think putting a kid in jail for 55 years for selling marijuana is obscene. We ought to get them back to work and into productive use and not put them in jail. So the interesting thing is, I go in, I've just that morning had a press conference, and we're suing the president over the NSA program. Guess who I was having lunch with that day? Eric Holder. I went to talk to Eric Holder because I do believe in talking to the other side. I'll talk to Bernie Sanders when he will talk to me, not very often. But I went in to talk to Eric Holder about criminal justice reform, and he looks at me and he says, I see you're suing me and the president today. And I said, well, we can still be friends, right? But one of the reasons I mentioned Holder is that a lot of conservatives have had nothing but derision for Holder, and I can understand the objections. However, he's getting ready to be replaced right now. And at the very end, Holder did some good things on criminal justice. One of the things he did was there's something called civil asset forfeiture. They can take your stuff. The government can take your stuff without you ever being charged or convicted. I'll give you a couple examples. A 15-year-old kid was selling some kind of illegal drugs out of a parents' house in Philadelphia. They took a $200,000 house. They barricaded it and evicted the family. A kid was leaving Boston. He was going to make his way and make his life in California. His dad gave him $2,000, and by the time he got to the Nevada desert, he still had $1,800, but he was on his way until he met the sheriff in some little town who said, prove to me that your money is gotten in a normal fashion, in a legal fashion, or it's mine. They took his money. If you've ever hired an attorney, to get $1,800 back will cost more than the $1,800. This is a real problem. And who's it disproportionately happening to? Poor kids, black kids, Hispanic kids. So now we have a new nominee, and we ask her about civil forfeiture, and you know her answer is, oh yeah, I'm fine with that. She confiscated $100 million from people who were never charged. She's ignored the reforms. She's not filed the paperwork. She's not tried to prove anybody guilty. She just takes their stuff. That is turning justice on its head, and we should defeat her. Your senators have some influence in that. Talk to both of your senators. I don't know their position. I have good relations with both of them. But talk to your senators if you think she shouldn't be the Attorney General. Another reason I have for her not being Attorney General, I believe in the separation of powers. Congress writes the laws, the President executes them, but the President does not write law, and we need to stop him. Montesquieu wrote about this, and Montesquieu was one of these French philosophers that Jefferson looked to and others, and he said that when the executive begins to legislate, when he assumes that ability to legislate and takes it from the legislature, then a form of tyranny will ensue. It's the worst thing happening in Washington. It isn't Obamacare, it isn't Dodd-Frank, it isn't immigration, it isn't the border. It's the collapse of the separation of powers. It's the President's unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional usurpation of power, and we can't beat him unless you help me. When our founding fathers instituted these co-equal branches, they talked about how each branch would have ambition, and that ambition would be pitted against ambition. What does that mean? Congress should be jealous of their power and not give any of it up. The President should be jealous of his power and not try to give it up, but they would butt heads, and there would be a balance, there would be an equilibrium. There was for a while, but it's been gradually slipping away from us. It isn't just this President. It's Republican presidents often too, and it really probably went big and went wrong with Woodrow Wilson. It's just been slipping away from us. We have Obamacare, and we are disgusted with the government telling us who our doctor will be and what we will buy. But you know what? It was 2,000 pages. Remember, Nancy Pelosi said you can read about it after we pass it. So since we've read about it, now the government, the President, the executive branch has added 20,000 pages of regulations. The problem is we are letting the executive branch write the laws. Congress is writing a vague outline of the laws, but we're not assuming our authority. It's the same thing with Obamacare as it is with immigration. It's the same thing, frankly, with war. We don't go to war unless Congress votes on it. Just before Christmas, I forced them to vote on it. I brought it before the Foreign Relations Committee, and the Foreign Relations Committee was working on a water bill they've been working on for 6 years. And so I attached a war resolution to it because I said, we have to debate this. And they, can I say bitched and moaned? They bitched and moaned and threw a fit, and were so unhappy with me that I brought that up. But we made them vote. And in the end, I voted no because they wanted to vote for an unlimited war throughout the world. We don't need that. But we do need to understand that it has to start in Congress, it has to obey the Constitution, and then good people may disagree on the facts of exactly when we need to be involved, but that's the debate over the facts. What are American interests and when do we get involved? But that should not be an easily gotten conclusion. That's the beginning of the debate. We should have a robust debate, and I tell people it's the most important vote that any legislator will ever take, and that's whether or not to go to war. You're going to get a choice on who the nominee is for the Republican Party. You're going to have 9, 10, 15, 20 who are eager to go and want troops on the ground. They want 100,000 troops on the ground right now in all of the countries. That's a big problem. We didn't leave 100,000 in Libya. We didn't leave 100,000 in Syria. We don't have 100,000 in Iraq. But if there's one true thing I can tell you that I think they cannot object to, that the facts clearly demonstrate, every time we've toppled a secular dictator, we've gotten chaos, and we've gotten the rise of radical Islam, and we've been less safe. And the world is more unstable. So I can tell you, if things move forward, whether I'm in the Senate or I do run for the nomination, I can tell you there will be one loud voice in our party saying, think of the unintended consequences, think of the young men who have lost both legs and an arm, think of the people who've lost every limb, and think about what we're going to accomplish and whether it will work before we go to war. I promise you that will always be something I take very, very seriously. Thank you.
this place for a bit, so feel free to come, mingle. Make sure that you're able to find out some of the exciting things we're doing here at Liberty, Iowa. Fix the Dollar will be back there as well, and make sure you stop by them. Especially Rampack is also going to be back there, and if you have any, if you want to go back there and do some sign-ups, track down somebody with one of these, and they're looking for help as well. So thank you very much.